Hello, welcome back to Discover the Wonders. And today we're talking about the wonder of rivers. So we're talking about a baby whose life was saved in a river. And we're going to talk about some of the amazing rivers in the world and also waterfalls. And we're going to talk about some amazing animals that are found in and around rivers. And we're also going to talk about a miracle that happened on a river. But today I have a visitor with me. Usually I always do these on my own. But today I have somebody with me. So, what is your name?
Esther.
And how are you related to me?
I am your daughter,
And which one in the family are you?
the second oldest.
And what do you like doing?
I like painting.
Oh, and how old are you?
13.
And what is your favorite Bible story?
Probably the story of Esther.
Queen Esther in the Bible, which we named her after. So Esther is going to sing some of the songs with me today. So today we will start off with the story of Moses. So last week we finished the story of Joseph. Joseph was reunited with all of his family, and then all of his family came to live in Egypt. So now we're fast forwarding to when Joseph has died and his brothers have died, and also the king of Egypt has died. So we're on to the next generation. And so now, Joseph's family have multiplied, and so there are a lot of them, and they're called Israelites since they came from Joseph's dad, who was Jacob, but God also gave him the name of Israel. So now there are all these Israelites that live in Egypt, and they keeps getting more and more of them. And now they have a new king who didn't know Joseph. And so he starts to see all these Israelites as a threat. And he says, there are as many of them as there are Egyptians. What if we go to war with somebody, and what if the Israelites turn against us and fight against us? We'll be in really big trouble. So we've got to do something with these Israelites. And so the first idea he had was to make them slaves. So all the Israelites had to work really hard for Pharaoh, and they had to build cities. But the harder they had to work, the more babies they had. So that didn't work. The king thought that the more hard they have to work, the worse they're treated, the less babies they'll have, and then they'll, kind of die out. But instead, they multiply even more. And so then the king has to come up with another plan. So his second plan is he talks to the Israelite midwives, and he says, when you're helping Israelite ladies give birth, if there are baby boys, you need to kill them. But the girls can live because, girls don't, well, sometimes they do, but don't usually, they're not usually the soldiers. It's more the men who are the soldiers. So he said we get rid of any new baby boys that are born. Now imagine being told that you've got to do that. And, in those days when the king gave you an order, you had to do it, or often you would lose your life. So it's very risky to disobey the king. But these Israelite ladies, they cared more about what God thought than about what the king thought. And they thought, we're going to obey God rather than the king. So that was very risky, but they decided they were not going to kill any babies. And so this plan of the king didn't work either. There were more and more babies being born. They didn't die. And God blessed the midwives because they were saving life rather than taking it, because they cared more what God thought. God bless them. But then the king got angry, and he said to those midwives, why have you not killed all the baby boys? Now they made up a reason. I don't know if it was just whether they made it up or whether there was any truth to it, but they said the Israelite ladies, they have their babies so fast that we don't get there in time. So now Pharaoh's got to come up with another plan. This time he told his soldiers, any baby boy that is born needs to be thrown into the river. But the girls, that we can let them live. Now, that's a pretty awful thing. That's a horrible time to have babies, and there was one family, they already had a girl and a boy, and during that time the wife became pregnant, and when her baby was born, it was a little boy. And when her and her husband saw that little boy, she thought, there is no way we're going to let the king throw our baby boy in the river. And so these were people who trusted in God, and so they decided they were going to do their best to save their little baby boy. And so for 3 months, they were able to hide him, and the soldiers didn't find him. So that would have been a very stressful and scary time. So they trusted in God, they prayed to God, and they did their best to keep their little baby safe. But after 3 months, the baby was getting a bit too big, he's getting more noisy and harder to hide, so then they had to come up with another plan. So the mother decided she would make a little basket, like a little boat, and then she would put him in the river. So she worked away on this little boat, a little basket, and then she put stuff on it to make it waterproof. And then she took him in the basket down to the river. And she put him in the river, and in the river there was a lot of reeds. So it was kind of a good hiding spot. And you know what? She's actually still obeying the king's command. She is putting him in the river, but in a safe way. And so now she's got to pray, and she's got to trust God to take care of her little baby. So she puts him in the river in the basket. And then Miriam, his big sister, she hung around to see what would happen and to try to keep an eye on him. So the mother, Jochebed, goes back home again, and Miriam hides and tries to keep an eye on baby Joseph. Now, who should come along to the river but the king's daughter, the princess? She goes down to the river with her maids to bathe. And so as she's washing herself, she sees something in the reeds, and she says to her maid, "What is that? Go see what it is." And so the maid goes and finds the basket and the reeds, and she brings it to the princess, and the princess opens it up, and baby Moses starts to cry. So this is the princess whose father has made the rule that all the baby boys need to be thrown in the river. She finds this baby, and when she sees him, he starts to cry, and it melts her heart. And she thinks, oh, this must be one of the Israelite baby boys. I want to keep him and keep him safe. Now, Miriam, she was watching this, and she had an idea, and she took the opportunity. She went over and she said, "Excuse me, would you like me to find an Israelite lady to feed him and look after him for you?" And the princess says, "Yes, please." And so Miriam was able to go home and find her mother. And her mother would have wondered what Miriam was coming to tell her. And Miriam was able to tell her, "You can come and look after Moses for the princess. The princess found him and wants Moses to be her own child." And so Moses' mother was very happy and came to the princess. And the princess says, "Take this baby, look after it for me, and I will pay you." And so Jochebed was going to be paid to look after her own baby. That's a pretty good deal. And so she took Moses home, and now Moses was safe. And so for a few years, he was able to live with his mom and dad and brother and sister. And then later on, he would go to live with the princess. So God has helped Moses' family and kept Moses safe, because later on he's going to have a very important job for Moses. So now let's talk about rivers. So in Africa, there is the Zambezi River, which is a very nice river, and there's a lot of African wildlife there. There are a lot of elephants and hippos and crocodiles, and it's actually called the River of Life because it supports so many people, and the river just does so much good to all the people around it that it is called the River of Life. So it supports like the ecosystems and fisheries. It is a source of hydroelectric power from dams, and it also has Victoria Falls, which is one of the largest waterfalls. And it's a really pretty waterfall, a very big one, and it is called the Smoke That Thunders because there's like so much spray that comes up from the falls, it looks like it's all smoky. But it is one of the world's greatest natural wonders. But back to the River of Life, that reminds me of a song I learnt when I was a child. And it says, there's a river of life flowing out from me. Now, Jesus compared himself to water, and he said that he was the living water. So when we trust in him, it's like we're drinking living water. And when we believe and trust in him, he said that then we have a river flowing out of us. So we have like God's blessing and God's love flowing out of us, and that blesses other people. So this song is called There's a River of Life Flowing Out from Me. There's a river of life flowing out from me, makes a lame to walk and the blind to see, opens prison doors, set the captives free. There's a river of life flowing out from me, spring up a well within my soul, spring up a well and make me whole, spring up a well and give to me that life abundantly. There's a river of life flowing out from me, makes the lame to walk and the blind to see, opens prison doors, sets the captives free. There's a river of life flowing out from me. So there is the Zambezi River in Africa. Then there is also a river in Peru called the Shanay-Timpishka River. Now, this river is a boiling river. It is the largest thermal and only boiling river, and its temperature can be from 45 degrees Celsius to 100 degrees Celsius. So it is a boiling river. I'd never heard of boiling rivers before. Now, there was a guy, so like this river wasn't studied properly like until 2011. And there was a guy who had heard stories about this river, and he thought, he didn't know if it was true or not because he'd never seen it for himself. So he didn't know if it was a myth or if it was really true. So when he grew up and he was a geoscientist, he decided he wanted to find out for himself if it was really true. Now, the reason it was hard to find out for yourself is because it was in a remote part of the rainforest. So he went on a hard journey right into the Peruvian Amazon jungle, and he found this river and he was able to study it. So now he knew for himself whether it was real, whether it was true or not. Now that reminds me of the Bible. Some people think the Bible's true, some people think it's a myth, but how do you know unless you search it out for yourself? Now, there was one guy, his name was Lee Strobel, and he was an atheist. Some of the time he was a journalist, and some of the time he was an editor of like a newspaper. But his wife became a Christian. And so this guy wanted to find out for himself if what she believed in the Bible was really true or not. So he went on a journey himself, not like a traveling journey, but because he was like a journalist, he was used to interviewing people. So he went on kind of a bit of a journey, And he started investigating to find out whether the Bible was true or not, to find out what he believed about it. So he started to interview a lot of different people who did believe the Bible, and he asked them all his questions. And so he was trying to find out for himself. And he came to the conclusion that it is true, and he became a Christian as well, and he's written a lot of books. The Bible, if you don't know if it's true or not, search it out for yourself. Read it for yourself. Talk to God yourself, and you might be surprised. So that's two different rivers. Now, there is a song I learned when I was younger too, which is called "I've Got Peace Like a River." So when we trust in God and when we know God for ourselves, we can have peace like a river. So Esther is going to sing this song with me. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. So, one wonder of rivers are waterfalls. So, the waterfalls are very beautiful and very amazing. And when I lived in Taranaki, we used to sometimes go up to the Dawson Falls, which are beautiful waterfalls on Mount Taranaki. But the highest waterfall in the world is in Venezuela, and it is called Angel Falls. And it is about, like, the water drops from about 3,212 feet. So it's a very amazing waterfall, and it was named after an American pilot, Jimmy Angel, who was the first one to fly over it, and that's why it's called Angel Falls. And then in Nigeria, you have the Rainbow Waterfall, and it is often called the Little Niagara of Africa. So that's a really beautiful waterfall, and it has about 7 streams, and they all kind of come together and joined together to make a beautiful waterfall. And when the sun's rays fall on the spray from the waterfall, they create beautiful rainbow colors, which is why it is called the Rainbow Waterfall. And then there is an amazing waterfall in the Yosemite Valley, and it's called Horsetail Falls. Now, a photographer made this waterfall famous because he took a photo which looked really interesting, really amazing. So sometimes it can only happen like a certain part of the year, like kind of in 2 weeks of the year. But if you take a photo right at the right time, it looks like a lava flow streaming down from like the rocky peak. So so this happens when the winter is wet enough that the water is flowing over. So it only happens during 2 weeks of the year, and the sun has to be setting at the right angle, and the weather has to be just right. So if you get all these things just right, then it looks like a lava flow. It looks like it's, kind of a fiery waterfall, which is quite amazing. So this is a real tourist attraction during those 2 weeks, but it doesn't happen every year. It's only when everything is just right. So that is the Horsetail Falls. Now, did you know there are some people who, when they look at a waterfall, they think, I want to climb that. Now, I don't think that. When I see a waterfall, I just think, oh, that's really beautiful. But some people actually climb waterfalls. Now, Japan is the best place to do that. So in Japan, there are people who rock climb up waterfalls. Now, that's even harder than rock climbing because it's all wet and you've got the water flowing down. But it is amazing that some people actually climb up waterfalls. Now, there are reverse waterfalls. Have you ever heard of that? There are waterfalls that flow up. Now, this is something very unusual that doesn't happen that often. But a while ago, some people saw this in Australia, in Katoomba, and they took a little video. And so the water, it flows up. Now, this happens because it was a very, very windy day, and when there is really big updrafts, that can cause the waterfall to flow up instead of flow down. So the guy who took the video, he took his family on a trip to the beach, and I think it was at the beach, on a cliffside, and he saw this waterfall going up instead of down. And he said it was so strange, it felt like he'd spotted a UFO. So let's talk about some animals that live in or around the river. So we have the Goliath frog. So in the African rainforests, there are enormous frogs. They weigh up to 3.3 kgs or 7.3 pounds. And these Goliath frogs, they don't croak. They're very quiet, but they make pools for their babies, and they rearrange the river rocks as if they are architects. So these big, quiet frogs, and they're named after Goliath in the Bible, the giant that David was able to fight. And then we have the Jesus lizard. Now, why would it be called the Jesus lizard? So this lizard can run on water. So when something's trying to come after it, it opens up its toes, and they have like webbed toes, and they can just run across the water really fast for up to 20 meters. So that's an amazing little lizard. And then something interesting, which only been found like not too long ago. This is in Peru. There is a decoy building spider. So this spider, it will build a decoy of itself. So it'll build like a fake spider, a great big fake spider. So it looks a bit like there's a spider hanging in the web, but it's just one that it's built to make it look like a spider, maybe to trick predators. So it gets like dead leaves and debris, and it makes a spider, which is pretty incredible. And then we have the electric eel. So electric eels, they live in really muddy water, and they're just about blind. So they have to rely on the electrical pulses that their body gives out to navigate and to explore their surroundings. And they can stun or kill other prey to protect them from predators. And then there are salmon. Salmon are pretty amazing fish. They can jump up waterfalls. So they go against the flow. They don't just get swept along with the current. They turn around and they go the other way. And sometimes when we do what's right, we have to be like the salmon. We have to go upstream, which is hard. But there are salmon that cross the road. So in some places in America or in Alaska, you might be driving along a road that's a little bit flooded, and you might have to stop and wait for a fish to cross the road, which sounds unreal. But these fish, so like there's like a little bit of water that's like flooded over the road, and these fish, because they try to cross the road as well, and because they can't swim over the road, they kind of flop and flap their way across the road, and it looks quite funny. Now, there was a miracle that happened on a river, on the Hudson River. So on January the 15th, 2009, there was a plane that was just taking off, and they hit a flock of Canadian geese. And so, yeah, they hit the flock of birds. They flew into the flock of birds, and it damaged the motor and the engine so bad that the pilot knew he was going to have to crash. And he was just by the Hudson River. So he had to crash into the river. There was nothing else he could do. But the way he crashed, the plane didn't break. Like, it all went very well. And everybody on that plane survived. 155 people on board. They were all rescued from nearby boats. Nobody died, although a lot of people were injured, especially from the cold water. But yeah, all those people survived. And a few months after the crash, the captain was asked how he could land so well on the water. You know, like, it all happened so fast. But he said one way of looking at this might be that for 42 years I've been making small, regular deposits in this bank of experience, education, and training. And on January 15th, the balance was sufficient so that I could make a very large withdrawal. So that is a miracle that happened on the Hudson River. Now we're going to sing another song. So we're going to sing one song which is called Like a River Glorious is God's Perfect Peace. But that song is based on a promise in the Bible that when we trust in God and when we're thinking, we have our minds on God, He gives us amazing peace. So we're going to sing that little promise first, and then we'll sing the song Like a River Glorious. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind So I hope you have enjoyed learning about Moses, who was rescued on the river, and the interesting and amazing rivers and the different waterfalls and the miracle on the Hudson River. And I hope that you may search out the Bible for yourself and find out for yourself whether it's true or not, and that you may know God's peace, which is like a river.